Right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to the final DIMH 2022 session. And it's a very special one. We are going to be talking about wearable devices. We're going to be talking about the rewards, the risks, the trade offs, neuro rights, if we've got any lawyers who want to pitch in, or the public as well. And yeah, I think we're going to just get started. I'd like to ask Ben and Aaron if you could introduce yourselves to the group, please. Oh, so, but let's say Ben. Sorry, it's a long day.
Hey, my name is Ben Andrews. I'm a cybersecurity lecturer. I hold a master's in cybersec, ethical hacking. Also done various bits of penetration testing over my time, as well as running my own businesses in various different areas. Personally, I've lived in China as a Buddhist monk. I've done various other sporting accomplishments, and I'm here today, I guess, as the devil on that shoulder rather than the angel on that shoulder. So we'll see how things go, right?
over to the angel, Aaron. No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Great to meet you all. My name is Aaron Sherwood. I am a wearable technology SME at Accenture, which is a professional services company, for those of you that don't know. My day job typically involves working with companies in industries ranging from life sciences, health, fast-moving consumer goods, aerospace and defense, and also just more corporate global initiatives, specifically focused on wearable devices. From a personal perspective, I'm not from a medical background. I'm actually from a business management background, but I have an interest in the mental health space, having had a diagnosis of PTSD in 2015, as well as a physical health issue. And so I now talk from a lens of how we can use data, devices, and technology to improve both physical and mental health. I'm also a global shaper for the World Economic Forum, and I lead the London hub, which is all focused on technology and innovation. So great to meet you all.
Thank you. Okay, Aaron, we're going to start with you, Aaron. We're going to do the kind of the happy, scary, happy sandwich kind of thing. So I love your energy when it comes to wearables. And you were just like, when I saw you in person, it was just like all this stuff all over you. Can you walk us through just like a typical, there you go. What is a typical day for Aaron like in terms of like your wearables and, how does it support you? Just, yeah, take us through that.
Yeah, so a typical day for me, I will wake up at a fairly regular time and I will check. So I just held my hand up here. So I live with an Oura ring. I have a Whoop band. I have an Apple Watch. I also have a biochip implant in my left hand. So probably moving towards the slightly crazy stuff, but I will wake up and I will look at my rest, my recovery, my sleep, and my activity score. And so what that means is before I go to bed, I'll try and make sure I have a cold shower to optimize my sleep, because that can increase my heart rate variability. I'll try and make sure I haven't eaten anything past 9 p.m. because I know that decreases some of my recovery scores. And then I'll check that in the morning to make sure that actually what I've done is reflective of that. And sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But I'll typically be using that data to actually look, optimize, track, and improve. And that might then affect the kind of workout that I do in that day as well, and what I eat, what I drink, and so forth. So that's it, probably more at a personal level, but at a professional level, I'm using these data and devices, whether that's in clinical trials, for example, by combining both clinical and consumer grade biomarkers. I'm sure many of you on the call, I can see a few titles of doctors around here, will be well aware that wearable data, lots of wearable devices on the market are not necessarily the most reliable or substantiated by medical research, but it's by combining both those clinical grade FDA cleared devices with consumer grade, which is really my sweet spot, and that's really where I spend most of my time with my clients.
That's great. And if you don't mind, but we don't have to, you mentioned that it does help you certain metrics with your PTSD you were mentioning, and physical things. So if it's not too personal, and if it is okay to ask you, in what ways does that help your preferences and needs?
Sure. Gosh, quite a few actually. So I'm in a really lucky position today where I manage my PTSD really well. I say manage, I don't believe you can be cured of it, but I certainly manage it well. The first one is sleep. So being consistent with my sleep is super important, and just making sure that I get a regular amount of set hours. I'm not somebody that functions well off limited sleep, and there's no point in even trying to do so. So making sure that I've got a good quality night's sleep is really important. And sometimes if I don't, and there are days I don't, that's a fact of life. Like here in London, it's been exceptionally hot over the last few days, and that's really had quite an impact on my sleep. But then trying to then adjust my workload and my schedule according to that is important. I also have an Oculus headset behind me. And so this is kind of a wearable, kind of not, but I describe it is. And so what I'll do is there's a really great app on the Oculus that's called Trip. And Trip immerses you into this world where you switch off for anything from like 5 to even 20 minutes. And it enables you to do exercises like box breathing, for example, which are proven to reduce anxiety, stress, and enables you to almost immerse yourself in those worlds. And then I can also see in my data from my smart devices from when I began at where my heart rate would be to where it is at the end. And I just like, out of pure curiosity, to see the changes. And there's that quote that says, "What you can't improve what you don't measure," right? So and I love just measuring and monitoring and seeing that improvement. And I've certainly seen that since we've sort of come out of the pandemic, with going to the gym and making sure I'm now getting the right fueling and nutritional strategy in, going to the gym frequently. I'm managing both my physical and my mental health really well, because I think they're both inextricably linked. I don't think they're necessarily two separate things. I think, if I attain a regular balance by going to the gym and monitoring the improvements there, I'm seeing it in my mental health as well. So that's really how I've been using it from that perspective. There are still other things in life that you just cannot control, particularly with PTSD. So for me, there are certain situations, but I'm a big believer in just putting yourself out there. And sometimes I remind myself that if my heart rate is going really high because I'm particularly anxious, it'll go within 3 minutes, because my panic attacks don't typically last longer than that. And I'm not having a heart attack, or it's not atrial fibrillation. There's nothing to worry about. So that's really how I've been using them.
Okay, thank you so much. And let me check first. So you're not a data scientist, or would you say that you have experience with data science and analyzing?
With a team of very brilliant data scientists that we basically take the data from these devices, and I work with them to help analyze and interpret. So we recently did a proof of concept experiment with Muse, the meditation and mindfulness band, and we were looking at all the different so alpha, beta, theta, gamma brain waves, and there I relied on a neurotech PhD individual to look at that data. We passed it over to some data scientists. So I'm more of the person that runs these studies and then relies on a whole ecosystem of brilliant people, like probably the majority of you on this call, to help me interpret that information.
Amazing. This is segueing in a spooky way, but I think now's a good time to Ben, hi. Just let's go into the experiment that we did. So yeah, I met Ben through LinkedIn. It's kind of random, and just through conversations, thinking about ethical hacking. I think we should probably just let people know what is ethical hacking, in case people are unfamiliar with that term. And then let's dive into the day that I went to visit you in London, and we did an experiment. But first, if you could, yeah, just explain what an ethical hacker does.
Okay, so essentially an ethical hacker is someone who has been given either permission by the data owner or the owner of the system to perform illegal activities on that system in order to identify any potential security flaws or vulnerabilities within that system.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'm only smiling because that just segued so nicely. So when I met with Ben, I won't say the name of the wearable, but an EEG commercial headset. We decided, I'm a neuroscientist and I do love data. We decided to put it on his head and see what he could achieve, trying to manipulate the output of the actual headset. So yeah, already that's meta. Just trying to like coming up with the idea, the thought of doing that, but then actually going through that day, that experience was just unbelievably surreal. So yeah, Ben, over to you. Do you want to just like walk through the experience? And I suppose, yeah, just talk about it first. Like, how did it feel?
Yeah, so I guess for me, the idea of the concept was that if I can hack the headset whilst I'm wearing the headset and manipulate the output of that data, then whatever we see on screen has been coded, right? So like whatever you see on your computer screen, whatever you see on your watch, whatever you see on your phone has been coded. And if it's been coded, then there's room for manipulation. And I guess particularly with the commercial companies, there is very little in the way of data efficacy in the sense of what we're showing you on the screen is the truth. And from a minor perspective, that's been evidenced by the recent lawsuit with Apple and their battery. You know, what the battery readout is telling you is not actually the truth of what the battery has in it. So I was wearing the headset and I managed to manipulate some code which would output a difference in the waves of the brain activity. And that kind of led us down the path of, if I can do it, then the people developing it can certainly do it. And what would the benefits to the people developing it be? And again, on the commercial side, you kind of start to ask the question of, if you're a paid developer and you've been given a brief, you're going to want to meet that brief in order to be paid. So if the brief is, we want to show that our product improves health, and I'm being paid to develop a product that will ultimately show you over a gradual amount of time that our product improves health, then I can quite easily code in some elements or some parameters that at a given time, I'm going to start to show that after prolonged use, this is improving your health. And I'm not, and just for the record, neither Becky or I are saying that that is the case. We're just saying that I was able to do that on that particular headset, which raised quite a lot of questions. Now, again, I'm not against wearables. I've got one on. I use a heart rate monitor when I train. I've been a high-level boxer. I understand the value in monitoring my heart rate, particularly. I think the key difference with heart rate is it's ones and zeros, right? It's binary. It's like it's beating and then it's not beating. So there's actually no point at all in manipulating heart rate data. When you start to get into mental health, there are benefits to commercial companies to be able to manipulate that data to suggest that their products work better than someone else's. And that was essentially where the project started. So we sat down for a few hours. It took me a while to get into it. I managed to do it, and yeah, that was the project. It was interesting. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ben. So yeah, we had well, the baseline condition where I asked Ben just to, relax for 5 minutes. And what was interesting as well is, Ben, you mentioned that you have narcolepsy, I believe, or yeah. And so we compared your baseline data across other people's baseline data, and we were just really interested in that kind of perspective as well. There wasn't a strong signature that was coming through that was showing that you were distinctly different from only a handful of other individuals, but nothing statistically significant. But it's very interesting that there's not much literature, or to my knowledge, about people who have narcolepsy in the wakeful state. So lots of sleep research, but in the wakeful state, looking at EEG and things. So we'd love to explore that even further. But so then you did, because I was there taking notes as Ben was doing this, the first condition or first method I sense this almost optimism to the attempt. The second approach, things got a little bit, a bit ugly. There are a few words thrown around, and there was some frustration in the signal. And then the third was a successful approach. There was no kind of euphoric moment in your data that we could see. That was the eureka moment, so to speak. But there was an interesting, a statistically significant difference between your baseline resting and all of the hacking conditions. But the second hack, the frustrated hack, was actually the most interesting of the data set. So sorry, just to give Ben a bit of feedback on his brain data, and we will talk about this later, but the reason this is so important is because we want to see, is ethical hacking, can this be a good thing? Can this be a good thing to the brain? Can we encourage young people and deter them from doing illegal activities and, performing ethical hacking? Is it as good as exercise? Is it, what is the cognitive state? What's the flow state like? I was really surprised that you reminded me that your situation wasn't so different from George the Poet, my friend whose brain I scanned when I asked him to freestyle in spoken word poetry. So there was interesting flow states going on there. But I suppose what I wanted to do is, and I'm sorry, we've got a drill. I hope it's not too noisy. But I just found it fascinating as a data scientist that we trust data so much, or we trust data outputs. And I'll give you two examples that I know of. So I know of a story, I won't point fingers or places, where the technician got very angry and upset with the PhD student and decided to replace the genetic samples with water samples. And the PhD student miraculously still found an association between mental health and these genetic markers. So there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen, not just with the coding of commercial headsets. I think there's a lot of trust in data and outputs that we can find anywhere, even algorithms on RCTs. We don't know if there is algorithmic contamination, or it's just across the board. So I guess all that just to say, we, myself included, trust data. We don't know if it's calibrated correctly or how, by whom, but we sometimes set our intentions of our day to what we see. And often it's behind a proprietary wall where it's a big, hopefully very intelligent group of signals put together. But I don't always believe that will be the case. So how do people, this is for everyone really, how do we feel about trusting something that's almost like behind a firewall, or there are so many unknowns about, to what extent do we set the intentions of our day around this? And Ben mentioned heart rate variability, but then of course it gets really, really messy when I set my day based on ratios of theta to gamma in a window of time against the backdrop of my genome. So yeah, just I wanted to open that question about trust and reliability of data to everyone. So I suppose we'll start with Aaron first, and then Ben, if you want to chime in, and then open the floor to everyone.
Yeah, I think that piece around trust in data will continue, and I don't think any one person can solve this problem. And I think there's a lot of scaremongering. If you look at, for example, Black Mirror, for example, that looks at the really dark dystopian future of technology, it can really put you off. But what I'm certainly seeing with a lot of my work is through partnerships with a lot of startups that are focused around private data sharing, secure data sharing of PII data and so forth, that can guarantee the security of that transaction. And I think that certainly enables me to do the work that I'm doing. But nonetheless, it's one thing that delays a lot of the projects that I would love to work on, because a lot of my legal teams, for example, will not approve some of the work that I really want to work on because of personally identifiable information or high category information being sent or whatever. But do we let that stop our progress? No. In many cases, I've actually had to rewrite some of our legal frameworks to get some of these projects off the ground. But yes, it's something to certainly be mindful of, but I think it shouldn't get in the way of making progress.
Great. Yeah. No, thank you. And just before to segue to Ben, Ben, you had said before that, we're not stating this, but some people's intentions in theory or in principle could be to create a path that's driven by data, not the individual. So they believe they're following something. And in psychotherapy or in mental health, there's also these ethical issues of giving someone a new type of approach, or the word, Catherine, you can definitely step in and help, but treating them like a retainer. So they might well be on their way to recovery and finished the program, but they're just going to stay on longer and longer and longer and switch treatments or tweak certain things that are optimizing to the wrong metric or outcome, not the individual. So but I just wanted to add that and yeah, pass it over to Ben for your thoughts, and then to everyone.
Yeah, I guess security of data and efficacy of data are two completely separate subjects. So, I mean, you can secure data in many ways. There's many ways to do it. We're still not amazing at doing it. Although we've got the technology to do it, like blockchain, you know, we could easily use blockchain to secure our personal data and transfer our data. The efficacy of data is the question for me, which is, we're believing what's being put on the screen, but we're not most of us aren't programmers, most of us aren't hackers, most of us don't know how to get in the background of that device and figure out if what is being translated from the device to the screen is the real thing. And there's no doubt in my mind that there's commercial entities out there that obviously want to tie you into their product, and they're going to do that using different methods. And I guess a good example for me is something like your Apple Watch, right? Where it kind of says, oh, you've met your activity goals today. Well, like I said, I've boxed at a very high level, and my rest days are important, and I don't want my Apple Watch bugging me that I've not met my activity goals on my rest day. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I understand how my body responds because I've been at a high level for such a long time. So I don't need my Apple Watch to tell me those things, and I don't need it adding that extra layer of anxiety or pressure for me to achieve a goal that I don't need to achieve on that day. And I think, again, the way these products are designed is very much as a gamification of your health. And they use people who understand how to get you tied into these products. So a lot of the products are designed by the same type of programmers that develop online gambling products, online gaming products, and they know how to tie you into these products. So I guess the key question for me is, if I can manipulate the data on screen, anyone can manipulate the data on screen who's got the same skill sets as me. And that then leads you down quite a scary path of, how do we even know that the data that's being represented about you is actually truthfully the data that's being obtained from that device? And I guess that is the key flip from medical to commercial, right? So medically, if I'm led in a hospital bed and you've got a pulse monitor on me, it absolutely has to be accurate because you need to know what's going on. Commercially, I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is get you locked into my product and my aftercare and my success story and all of those types of things. So I've got a completely different set of motivators, and therefore there's the question of, is it true? Like, I don't know, because no one really, you can study the research on these things, which is very sketchy and limited. Like, when it comes to the actual product itself, I'm not saying the research on the actual waves, the gamma waves, delta, those sorts of things are that research is there and it's real. But the products that represent that, I don't know. And that's just my question, like my question to all of you, like, how do you feel about it? I don't know how you all feel about it. I'm not saying it's the truth, and I'm not saying it's not the truth. I'm just saying I was able to do it, so I don't know.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I want to hear from everyone, but we had a session earlier today that just triggered a thought about unethical marketing. So it's a different thing here, but the thought of using fake reviews in a digital mental health space, saying it worked for me, it worked for me, it worked for me, that bypasses efficacy validation. Those who are trying to do well, trying to do right, and you can just undermine that process very easily in so many different ways, from a marketing perspective even. So this is a big problem when people are receiving fake information potentially, or being nudged in ways. So all right, I think we've all said enough, but yeah, I'd love to hear any thoughts from people, and anyone who's been on the chat, if you want to summarize anything up, because I've been totally engrossed in this, or just raise your hand, just yell, or don't yell, actually, just speak nicely. Okay, yeah, Kath.
Again, I feel like I've spoken on every panel today now. So I would certainly say, in terms of trustability of those apps, like Aaron, I'm also a Whoop and Aura, but I also use other HRV technologies as well. And sometimes I will kind of do a not quite a quasi analysis, but I will check them against each other to see if I'm getting data that's representative of truth or not.
Yeah, I think with HR, I guess heart rate is different. I mean, like I said, heart rate is binary. There's no point in lying to you about your heart rate. Like, there's no benefit to any company to be inaccurate about your heart rate. So I do kind of separate heart rate and pulse out in this, because, you know, I can just go analog and put my finger on my pulse and count my heartbeat. So there's literally no point in you lying to me about it. I can do it in an analog way. But I think when it comes to, I think where Becky and I were coming from when we looked at this headset is, where's this going? Is this going to a place where employers are going to start to ask employees to measure their activity when they're working at their screens, and start to get flow data, and if they're in the productive zone, or the, you know, whatever zone it is, and that's where for me the difference is. Like, heart rate particularly is binary. Like, you can count it with your finger, you know what it is what it is. So yeah,
I would certainly say, Ben, that the heart rate variability is slightly different to the binary version of beat, beat, beat to a heart rate, and the idiosyncrasies of heart rate variability. And I can tell you now, I certainly know of a health company that is going to start implementing this via, preferably if they could do it in the same way that I've got some apps that I use on my phone and clip on my ear. Yes, I know that they are going to try and use these in settings. I know that there's a company that will use that in terms of, and we're back to the panel earlier, coaches that go out and do heart rate variability conversations. And I think what I'm watching at the minute is a health-based company going out with psychometric data that is now going to try and tie it together with tangible biofeedback. And that for me is concerning, given some of what you've said today, especially about being able to hack into that data.
Right, I'm going to pass it over to Ben. You had your hand up first.
Yes, so I used to be the person in charge of clinical safety for our digital systems in my trust, and there are two national standards. So there's DCB 0160 and DCB 0129, which covers the manufacture of clinical systems, digital systems. And both suppliers and users of digital systems have to conform to these standards, which require them to do a safety testing of the product and its application. And what used to worry me was firstly the lack of awareness of these standards and solutions across industry, and also even with some of the quite big suppliers, and also with consumer institutions which failed to apply these solutions. The other thing that really worried me was cybersecurity. So the nightmare scenario I used to wake up with at night was the idea of a hacker breaking into an insulin pump through Bluetooth or another remote access device and programming that pump to squirt out some extra insulin, which would be frankly fatal to the person on the receipt. and how the people responsible for that, for the cybersecurity around medical devices, were willfully ignorant and resisting my demands that they actually ensure that the necessary cybersecurity precautions have been considered and applied. So for me, that's where I think the real security risk is. And say we have the development of neural techniques that can so-called induce relevant slow waves to help with sleep through these headbands and things. Well, what happens then when someone hacks that device and starts zapping your brain with something potentially epileptogenic, as it were, and can put you in, give you a seizure? So these are all the things that I think we need to be concerned around, and it's the application of existing safety standards in this space. And finally, well, yes, there's not much that matters in terms of measuring your heart rate, but there's new understandings around blood pressure variability. So your absolute blood pressure, yes, that's important. If it's really high, that's important. I have a device, which I won't show to the audience, on my desk that I'm currently in conflict with the manufacturer around, because actually I've been a bit anxious over the last 2 months because it's been reporting that I have significant hypertension. Go along to my GP, my blood pressure's plumb normal. So my blood pressure machine has been making me anxious about a non-existent problem with my high blood pressure. And that's the kind of, I think, problem with medical devices that are supposed to be certified, that give people undue anxiety about non-existent problems. Which I'm going to have to call in the cavalry to heavy-duty artillery to actually measure this device using top-grade industry standard materials, to then challenge the supplier that their product is not up to scratch. But I can do that because I got the contacts. But what chance does the ordinary consumer have? So I think those are the kind of sorts of challenges I think we have in the wearable and device landscape.
Ben, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate what you just said, because when your examples are health, I know you touched on anxiety. When you come to mental health, I've been doing neuroscience and genomics, molecular neuropathology, scanning brains, all this kind of stuff. And with the EEG data, it so worries me that even if you put it in the hands of 12 different research groups that have the best intention, really great things, we're going to see different results. This is mental health. This is very messy. So a long time ago, there was a brilliant study that I don't even think finished publication because it upset two camps in the fMRI groups. But the researcher controlled for clinical heterogeneity by essentially sending out the same data set of schizophrenia, spectrum disorder, and controls, and asked all of these people to analyze the data. And they were two camps of analysis that were often bashing heads. No one had the same output. And sometimes it was as simple as even within the same software, they changed the Gaussian smoothing kernel from 10 to 12, very subtle, and yet a blob disappears in the brain. And so I, as a neuroscientist, I worry so much. And another example, we're going way back in time, but just to prove the point, a group of scientists put a dead piece of salmon in the scanner. And we've come a long way since then, but they showed that they were able to show happy faces and sad faces to this dead piece of salmon. And they saw an association in brain activity to happy faces. And it's just like no disrespect to neuroimaging. I've been in the field. I've met lots of great people. We've moved on, kind of, but with EEG, especially when I do my own testing and I don't use the proprietary outputs, I don't trust anything, just for me, because I'm so geeky about this stuff. I can't even have validation in my own data, doing my own pipelines and processing, trying to make complicated inferences and interpolations. And, if a channel drops out, I'm going to really try and connect the data across those channels and make inference, and let alone a proprietary thing. So just thank you for saying that, because it is very ethical. I think your hands up again, Ben. Yeah.
So it's just another thing that's coming through the pipeline. So I'm a trauma specialist. I work with treatment-resistant trauma, and I have to say my success rate's really high. There's only the number of people I haven't actually got better pretty much completely is kind of fingers on one hand. And there's this device that's being touted that apparently, changes brain waves in people, and you should use this with EMDR in order to get people better. Now, I've got a massive problem with that, because even if it increased the efficacy by 1%, the barrier it's going to create to accessing care, and I already have people who suffer endlessly with PTSD, totally unnecessary, because they can make a complete recovery from it. I would call it a cure, in my experience. And then now they've got to have this special device around their head to get better. Well, actually, it isn't necessary. So I think we're creating unnecessary complication for some of our really effective treatments. In order to sleep, I have to measure my sleep using my wristwatch, and if I'm not, then I'm anxious about it. So I think that there's the introduction of complexity that doesn't give the benefit that its cost implies, as opposed to actually in some cases being really helpful. So we know, sleep monitors can detect life-threatening apnea, for example, and prompt people to get treatment for something that actually can take 10 years off their life. So, and also the AF detecting atrial fibrillation, again, another example of something that's potentially life-saving. So I think it's how we apply these technologies, and ubiquitous general application may not necessarily always be the way forward. It ends up giving us unnecessary anxiety about our rest days, or in my case, my blood pressure.
I think if I can just touch on some of the bits you've mentioned, Ben. Firstly, with regards to hacking into a Bluetooth enabled device, or unfortunately those fears are real. Like, it's one of the easiest things to do in the world, particularly in our NHS hospitals, because the security is just not there. Like, it is a very easy thing to do. When it comes to the anxiety that these devices can induce, it's quite interesting from a Buddhist perspective. Like, a lot of the buzzwords that are around at the moment are like over 3,000 years old, right? Like mindfulness and understanding how to control and regulate your own health and your own anxiety. And I mean, those teachings have been around forever, like thousands and thousands of years. One of the things that you've touched on, and it does resonate with me massively, is we're moving away from the middle path, which is a massive part of just general health, health in general, right? Not being too extreme in either direction. And we're moving towards the extremely good things to do. And just by moving into that extremely good area, you're inducing, you're almost making an OCD version of yourself in order to try and comply with what you're being told is really, really good for you. And just as a little personal example, I remember one of my fights. It was one of the best fights I've ever had, and my data for my heart rate was actually really, really off compared to my normal heart rate. And if I'd known that during the fight, it would have concerned me, and it actually would have made me change my behavior during that fight. Because I didn't know that, it meant that it didn't change any of my behavior at all, and I ended up having one of the best fights I've ever had in my life. So I think there is definitely something in what you're saying with regards to the fact that some of these items can induce anxiety. And again, I take it back to that starting point, whereby in your field, your manufacturers are meant to be complying with the standards that you've mentioned. In the commercial field, the consumer field, who knows? Like, and unfortunately, it's the consumer items that are being touted as these new ways of managing X, Y, and Z. And yes, absolutely, they work for some people, like, no doubt. But probably the analog versions would have worked for some people as well. And when I say analog, I mean like meditation and exercise and discipline and introducing those elements into your life would have probably worked for some people as well. So it's a difficult, it's a huge area. It's a difficult area.
So the clinical safety standards do apply across all settings for everybody in the United Kingdom. So if you make a health product that's intended to ameliorate or change or interact in any way, shape or form with someone's health condition, then you must be compliant with both DCB 0160, 0129, and also medical devices. You just must. And it's actually quite a serious offence not to. And people just plead ignorance. I think my plea around the quantification of self is that, I think, as Aristotle said, it's the virtue of the mean. Not doing it at all, clearly not helpful. Doing 100% of the time on absolutely everything, clearly not helpful. There is some mean somewhere. I have to hold my hand up. I don't know where it is. I got it wrong last week. Hopefully I'll be a bit wiser going forward, and I think that's the thing which we just need to ask ourselves: when might it be helpful? So it certainly helps me in terms of getting me out of bed and doing some exercise. When might it not be helpful? And helping people to find that mean, and the mean that's right for me will not be the mean that's right for Aaron. It won't be the mean that's right for Ben, and I think that's a bit of a skill, finding. And then also what's right for me this week may not be right for me next week. So I think it's a bit of a movable feast here. And that's where individualization, individual choice, being sensitive to the self, and that's where personal mindfulness becomes fantastically important, having that sensible awareness of what is helpful and what's not helpful.
I think just to go to your point about products getting through and needing rigorous evaluation, from a data scientist perspective, you can get some products in there, I think, in a potentially, hopefully not, but a sneaky way. If you look at enough aggregated data and you don't choose to look at a subpopulation, I'll give you one hypothetical example is alcohol misuse or alcohol reduction apps, and it might work for the majority, but then you go through the data, and for young males it does the exact opposite. It's a drinking game. So I think also there's that layer of aggregation, and I personally don't trust aggregated. I'm seeing Kath's sample of one. I want to trust my own situation, but there's this also that scale of the aggregation of information, and do you get lost or left out of that signal, and you no longer are representative of the product that just gets the A-OK kind of thing. So but I'm aware of the doom and gloom. I also want to make sure we're because Aaron said a lot of this is very helpful, and so just saying like it's got to be the right place, right time, that kind of thing. But if anyone has any positive stuff they want to chuck in here, just so we're not overweighting to the negative. Or we just keep going.
I have to say, I love my Apple Watch, and it gets me, it kicks, excuse my French, it kicks my ass, and I absolutely love it. So yeah.
That'll do. That'll do.
I also think what's really important to be mindful of as well is that now with the evolution of wearables, they're starting to now bake in the fact that it won't necessarily give you any concrete next step for 2 weeks. So Aura is a great example of that after that 2 weeks, they give you that report and it gives you that baseline of what's normal for you. So rather than you immediately getting that device and thinking, oh my goodness, my heart rate's really high, or my heart rate variability is a lot lower than what some of my friends are, actually the fact that they're giving you that period of 2 weeks for it to use its algorithms to work out what is normal for you, it certainly enables me to know that actually if somebody were to hack into my devices and anything were particularly skewed, that would probably raise the alarm bells for me. So I think as these devices are maturing and evolving and listening to consumers, that's really valuable. And to the point about this leading potentially to people with hypochondria and thinking they've got problems that perhaps they don't have, I think that is certainly a risk with lots of wearable devices. I will frequently look at my Apple Watch, for example, and test if I've got atrial fibrillation. I don't have it, but the fact I've got that capability, I'll do it. And like I put in the chat here around, sometimes, you have to sort of take these things with a pinch of salt. Sometimes I do wake up in the morning and my recovery score might be low. Does that affect my day? At the beginning, yeah. If it said I had a low recovery score and I've got to go into work and perform at my peak, mentally I'm thinking, hang on a minute, my wearable data has said that I am not at my peak, yet I feel okay. So which one do I believe in? And so I just think it takes a very savvy consumer to be able to take that information, and it's how they interpret that. But I think that is how it is at the moment, I suppose, that it's down to the individual's interpretation of that, of how you choose. I don't let it affect my day now. Sometimes I use it if it's a great day. So I know now that with our chief medical officer and I will, first thing we say when we jump on a call is, oh, how are you feeling? And if I've got a good recovery score on my Whoop, I'm 91% today. And it's now quite a fun thing to use on our calls. If not, I probably won't speak up. So I think it's just a culture piece as well.
Thanks, Erin. Oh, Kath, yep, hand up. Sorry, I'm so engrossed
again,
in this.
It's just on the back of certainly with Ben. I mean, one of the things I've found with a lot of the clients who I'm working with, particularly on the HRV software. So if I just tell you about the HRV software, often I will get people that say, no, I'm not stressed. I'm absolutely fine. And we bob them on the HRV readout, and it says that they're not doing as great as they thought they were. And then what happens is we can then have a conversation about introspection, subjectivity, what that feels like. The client might go away and buy a device. And I've known a few clients to go away and say, well, what is it that you wear, Kath, and how do you use it? So kind of reflecting on what Aaron said there. Yeah, some mornings I get up and, you know, maybe I've had a brilliant dream and it says, oh, you didn't sleep very well. And I think, but I feel really refreshed. So in my words, sod off aura, I feel great. And then other days I will get up and I absolutely believe everything it says. You know, so there is this thing about we can check in. I mean, I've got pulse oximeters and I could go to the whole far end of that kind of introspective, how am I doing? How's my body doing? And take myself probably to an anxiety attack within 30 seconds versus actually it's a marker. It's a bit like the DNA stuff that I've done. It's not the end result. It's just something that I can look at and go, okay, that gives me choices now where I can take actions to mitigate and reduce. And of course, that's what we're helping our clients do in a therapeutic setting when we're giving them the information about, you know, their nervous system or how they're sleeping and things like that. So I see it as a facilitative measure, not necessarily a hypochondriac's picnic bag, because I will only use it with certain clients in certain settings. And this has been something that, you know, again, goes back to that panel earlier about, you know, qualifications and the right setting, the right person, the right time.
And you've got a human in the loop, right? The trouble will be, how do we scale, Kath? How do we scale others to do this?
Education.
Exactly. So we've still got 10 minutes. Mark, I've seen you've just joined. I don't think we're going to do a massive deep dive, but you want to say just hello to the group. Me and Mark are partners in crime with EEG stuff.
We do, yeah, something. Yeah.
but just a couple minutes, Mark.
Yeah, we did some interesting stuff. Looking at creative flow in artists from, say, George the Poet. We're doing rappers like Lemsey. We're doing dancers. We're doing all sorts of different people looking at creative flow. We're looking at whether a different output of alpha wave activity, delta wave activity, etc. We actually find some really cool stuff in terms of how people actually get into creative flow and get into that zone of just doing their art, basically. And so we're analysing quite a lot of data at the moment, including Ben with his hacking the Muse headset. It was actually measuring his brain waves and hacking at the same time, and that's produced a lot of really interesting data. And so actually the data analysis we're looking at was literally in the past couple of days. We actually looked at that as well. So it's actually some really interesting stuff coming out. But a lot of delta wave activity as well. Actually looking at sleep state delta waves into using creative flow, actually hacking the device. So I think for me it's been really quite an interesting kind of ride, and actually seeing this similarities between all creative flow, whatever you're doing, from artistic endeavors to actually work. People get into that creative flow and actually getting that delta wave activity, and we're still analyzing lots of data, but it's really proving quite interesting.
Yeah, and we'll do a separate YouTube cybersecurity and digital mental health interview with Ben, and we'll just do like the data dump. We'll do the
Yeah,
full
it's
the full
fantastic.
deal.
And,
But
and I
oh, yeah.
was going to say one final thought when people are talking about the apps, etc. I mean, the apps are, I think apps in general are really great, but it's almost like checking. Sometimes it's we can be over reliance to looking at an app. It's almost like checking whether the fridge light is on in the fridge each time, isn't it? To keep checking and checking and checking. And sometimes it can really instead of that, the benefits of getting to a meditative state or calm state and sense of well-being, it's something that can get. It's like checking the weather app before you go outside, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be sunny outside, and you think, well, fantastic, but then you might not go out because you think it's going to rain. So I think there's a halfway house with all this, I think.
And mental health data, as we know, I was saying earlier, it's messy, it's really hard. And so could you give us like 1 or 2 examples of why it is so hard to clean raw data and all the decision making that needs to go into it, not just necessarily believing proprietary outputs per se?
Yeah, it's in terms of cleaning up raw data. I mean, it's obviously best to be consistent with cleanup as well. So consistent right across the board in every piece of raw data we acquire. But it can actually over-bias. So again, it's just using automated processes and visual eyeballing to take out standard effects and artifacts like blinking, muscle effects, etc. But again, trying to keep the data as in the rawest state possible, obviously, and that's the important thing, without trying to incorporate bias into the data as well. So I think methodology-wise, using EG Lab as well, we're using a set cleanup routine, a protocol to actually clean the data up as well. So it keeps consistency across. So we've seen consistency across. That's why you can take a poet, a rapper, a dancer, a hacker, and basically consistently compare them all. And we've actually compared a poet, a rapper, and a hacker. Actually, a kind of and just looking at baseline, and it's really quite interesting what comes out of that as well. So it's really quite, So again, consistency, that's the key, rather than trying to incorporate bias into the data.
Yeah, and that segues nice to Ben, which I just wanted to, if anyone else wants to jump in. But Ben, what was okay, let's say ethically hacking, what is the typical feeling, the pre and post? Is it anything like boxing? Is it a different, what does it feel like to you once you're in it, you've achieved it?
Yeah, so yeah, it is. I mean, you get the sweats, like through the frustration. It takes, I mean, it's the same process, right? It's like is focus, discipline to achieve a desired goal, and ultimately, I think, like anything that incorporates focus, discipline to achieve a desired goal is essentially meditation. That's essentially what meditation is. Is the ability to still and discipline the mind to achieve a desired outcome. And in the sense of meditation, is to ultimately achieve nothingness, which I've never achieved, but and it's the same with boxing and the same with hacking. Like absolutely, it's the same feeling. Like it's exactly the same feeling. You get excited, you get demoralized, you get frustrated, you get happy, you get like the whole range of emotions, and you do zone out. Like I can be in front of a screen on a hack, and I can start at 6 o'clock, and I can look down at the clock and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, I've not eaten, I've not drunk, I've not like, I have no idea that that's now the time. Like it's just, absolutely, you are in a state of flow, as I imagine flow to be, because you are focused on a single point. There's nothing else going on in your mind. Like it's just that single end goal, and that's what boxing gives you. That's what physical activity gives you. Well, I think hard physical activity gives you. I don't think gentle physical activity gives you that, but difficult physical activity gives you that state of focus. Hacking gives you that state of focus, but my day-to-day work doesn't. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's definitely a difference in when I'm hacking compared to when I'm lecturing, maybe, or you know, that type of thing, for sure.
Yeah, because you mentioned coding versus hacking and how you have to be pulling, constantly thinking of not one thing, but just pulling ideas together. So that's, to me, like a freestyle rapper as well. You just have to let things go. And
yeah, so hacking is very much it's a problem solving state, and you there is no, you don't know the right, you don't know the wrong, and you have to pull on so many different areas of knowledge in order to obtain the end goal. That exactly that is the same as when you're trying to put a freestyle together. You have to pull on so many different areas of knowledge in order to make that flow work. And it's identical. It's an identical type of, it is an art, really. It's not a you know, it's not a technical, yeah, like if you're a script kiddie, if you're someone who just rips off other people's code, then yeah, it's just, you know, it's just work. Like, but if you're someone who actually works through the problems and identifies the way to get in and how to move around and how to pivot, then it is an art form. You know, it's a difficult thing to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks. So I'm just mindful of the time. We've got less than a minute, really. But Erin, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share? Anyone else as well, just to wrap up the session?
No, I think my parting word would be that, you know, wearables at its highest level are both, you know, extraordinary that we've got such variety and depth and choice on the market at the moment, but it is a fact that, you know, and it's worth us definitely talking about some of these socio-political, even economic implications of them. No technology is perfect. The question is technology an inherently political thing? I say no. But ultimately, it also comes down to the user and how that's used. So yeah, it's I'm definitely remaining pro wearables.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, any last thoughts from anyone else? Otherwise, I will close with a thank you, but just pause in case.
About one thing that Ben Wright said about you can't stay in a state of flow if you check you're in it. It's like riding a bike, because you know you're riding a bike, you fall off. You know, it's exactly right. You know, it's totally right.
Yeah, and I guess my only closing thought is, do you know what's being shown on your screen is legitimately what's being transferred from the device? And
yeah. It's really quite interesting as well in terms of each different time you try to hack as well. You get more. I don't know whether the second hack we looked at was actually more euphoric, because you basically say he's more in the flow there, and then the third hack when
he's frustrated in the second one.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to segue to the interview, a proper interview, because I'm mindful of Erin's time. I'm mindful of all of the guests here, and so yeah, just I've recorded this. I will put it up. I will share it. If you want to see it before I send it out, just let me know. That's not a problem. I can cut anything out. Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, thank you. This ends the conference, so I'm just gonna go relax and not wear a headset and just not see tech for a while. But yeah, thank you all so much, and yeah, stay in touch, and yeah, have a nice evening, morning, wherever you are.
yeah.
Okay.
Take care.